Okay, so today we are going to talk about perspective. This is your teacher, Insane Pain, coming to you from the art room. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about perspective, and we're going to cover a few things before we actually get to the assignment. All right, so first we have our vocabulary. So we've got linear perspective, horizon line, vanishing point, atmospheric perspective, 1-point perspective, and 2-point perspective. Don't worry, we'll be covering each and every one of these things as we go along, so don't panic. All right, so let's go ahead and start about linear perspective. We'll start right there. What does it mean? Linear perspective is basically a technique created that we use to create depth in 2D artwork, because we all remember that 2D artwork is flat. It just has length and width. It really doesn't have any depth to it. So we're going to try to fool the eye into thinking that it's like stretched out and we actually can step inside the artwork. Okay, so let's start talking originally about video games. Way back in the past, video games from like the Atari 2600, this was what they considered high-end graphics. As you can tell, there's pretty much just length and width. It is totally flat. Although it was hours of fun, it was just not really that engaging. So that moves us on a little bit farther in the future, which would be Castle Wolfenstein. This was one of the first 3D games that was pretty much, I spent thousands of hours wasted on this, but it was loads of fun. And you can see you can actually get a little bit of the feel of some of the depth going back in here, and this guy, you just start running and attack him and everything. It just kind of created a little more depth to it, a little more realism, which now moves us a little more into the future, where we are today, probably present, in the game quality. This is Assassin's Creed, one of my favorite games, and this was, as you can tell, they've created a lot more realism in here, which actually helps the person playing really get engaged with it. All right, so we're going to talk about 1-point perspective and how we can create this. This is a very famous painting known as The Last Supper. And to create the 1-point perspective, to give us the illusion that we were there, the artist actually put a chair right here. That's what we're kind of looking at in the foreground here, that's where we would be seated or where we're standing behind to look inside of this painting. So, but to create this illusion, we would first need to find the horizon line. So that horizon line is where we meet, where we see that the line is where the sky meets the ground. So we could see here, we've got our sky created here, and then the ground right below it. Now, it's a little hard to see in the background. Fortunately, we have a window to help us, but if we didn't have that to create that line, we would actually have to create perspective lines to find that. So from the horizon line, we could see that we have a lot of lines shooting out this way. There's a little one there. There's some that come across this way. It's a little hard to see. The farther back you get, the tighter they're going to get. So these are our perspective lines, and that's where, wherever they meet, that is the vanishing point. Notice that there's only one. Okay, where all those lines converge and they meet, that is 1 point, and that is the vanishing point, also what we call 1-point perspective. Okay, so take a look at this image right here. Classic, easy to see. You can clearly see the sky, which is up here, and where the ground is, it's here. So where those two meet is right in this point right here. But this roadway is kind of our cheater with these lines that go across, which takes us back to that small point back there known as the vanishing point. All right, here's another great example. Even though we don't have sky because we're inside a building walking down the road or this hallway, you can see that these horizontal lines are helping us converge down to this point, but these diagonal lines here are going to be pushing to 1 point, which is way back there, and that is the vanishing point. All right, so this is a great example, a Currier and Ives print, very famous for showing the way the world looked in 1886. So as we're kind of looking at how this is, we can see all these telephone lines and power lines and all these things jumping around, which is very crazy and difficult to see. But if we followed along some of these diagonal lines here, they would all converge and meet right around here. We could see the sky. we can see the ground, so we know that it's kind of right about here. Now, thing to remember about the horizon line is it doesn't always have to be at eye level or dead center in the middle. Sometimes it can be a little bit lower, sometimes it can be a little bit higher. All right, here's a great example here, the Annunciation. This is where the angel was telling Mary that she is pregnant. Oh no. And so here we go. What's going to happen? We need to find out, to create this realistic effect here, we need to find these diagonal lines and where the horizon line is. I really do not see the sky. I'm seeing the top of the building. I'm seeing some trees. I think that's the trees. And then we got some ground and a fence. So that kind of messes me up here. But we're going to start by finding those diagonal lines. Where are those diagonal lines going to? This one's an easy one, right? But then this one and this one are a little harder, but we can see they're kind of converging into the corner of that window almost. So if I could put my vanishing point right there, because that's where those lines are converging to let me know that's where it belongs, that is where I can add my horizon line. Excellent, horizon line. So a lot of times the artist would do that to try and fool the eye into, seeing that you're inside the painting. Let's take a look at another one. All right, here's another great painting. Oh, wow, it looks like Athens. It's Greece. And here we go. Oh, I see sky. I can see some sky right here, a little bit up there in those windows. Back here, I definitely see the ground because they're all laying around hanging out here. And now we've got maybe here, I'm going to guess, but I've seen this a few times. I'm not really sure, so let's double check. Let's grab some of our diagonal lines. Look at all these little lines here. They're all shooting back this way. Definitely these up here. So let's try a few. Boom, here we go. Diagonal, diagonal, diagonal. Yep, looks like we are going to that point right there. And that's where I'm going to drop my vanishing point. So open view. Diagonal lines verging into one point, vanishing point. And then from there, I'm just going to, because I know it's 1 point perspective, I'm going to run a horizontal line that goes from left to right, straight across, so that way I know that is probably my wonderful point. All right, so that brings us to another thing, atmospheric perspective. Now, atmospheric perspective is something that you're going to see to try and fool your eye into getting a little more realism. So objects in the background get a little blurrier, and they usually tend to lose a lot of their color. They kind of get muddy and muted. So even though you might have really bright greens and oranges in the foreground, as you get farther and farther towards the back, they're going to get kind of muddled up. And that's where we could see back here, it gets kind of faded, and it's not as easy to see. So let's take another example. I'll take a look at one. Here's a great game. I love playing Minecraft. As you can see here, he's up close. He's really sharp and very clear. And then as we start getting back, the stuff starts getting a little blurrier, a little more blurry, really kind of blurry back there. But notice how we've muddied up those colors. The programmers in the graphics have muddied up these colors, so it really helps you to see that illusion of depth. Here's another great example, again, back to Assassin's Creed, one of my favorite games. You've got this great crystal clear figure in the foreground. We have Ezio Auditore here, crystal clear, and then as you start working your way back, it starts getting blurrier. Like this guy's really far away. Look how tiny he is. He's super small, so as things get farther away, they are going to get smaller, but the coloring starts, blurring out, and we start losing characters. It's hard to see, but there's one character right here, and one right over here. They are very, very small, and they're very, very blurry. And notice as we keep going back, it gets almost foggier and foggier till you can't see much. Okay, so those are some great examples of atmospheric perspective and how we can use that in artwork to create the illusion of depth. So let's take a look really quick at 2-point perspective. We've already seen one. We've already seen how the diagonal lines converge and meet together into one piece or 1 point, which is our vanishing point. Now, if we converge on some of these lines here, it looks like some of these diagonal lines are going across. It looks like there's going to be two, which in 2-point perspective, you have two vanishing points. 1-point perspective, one vanishing point. 2-point perspective, two vanishing points. All right, I'm going to go with a little simpler drawing here to help us break this thing down. So I'm going to state that this here is a wonderful example of a 2-point perspective. And now what we're going to look at is drop in to just the left side. Just think of one side at a time. Don't overthink it. So I'm going to concentrate on the left side. So these diagonal lines on this thing are going over here. For this cube in the front, this will be my middle point. Now this cube right here, we're just going to concentrate on everything on the left side of that vertical line straight up and down. And they are merging right over here to the left side, which is going to give us our vanishing point. Now at this point, I'm just going to, boom, get rid of those lines because they're a little confusing. Let's go to the right side. So vertical line, straight up and down on this cube. Follow these diagonal lines going all the way to the back. And if you see this little building right back here, that's also a cube, isn't it? It's kind of a little piece, but we use that vertical line right there to break this piece in half. And we follow those lines back to the right side vanishing point. So at this point now, we have a left side and a right side vanishing point. So the line that you have that goes straight between 2 points is definitely a straight line. So a horizontal line, also known as the horizon line, where the sky meets the ground, is right there. So I know we could see our sky, even though it's kind of not colored and real pretty that we can see. And this is kind of gray, so it's not, they kind of all seem the same, but this would tell us right here, this horizon line where the sky meets the ground. All right, so here's a great example here. So I think at this point, you could pause the video and draw this on the screen, or you could just come up to the board and do this, and we're going to practice just seeing where these lines meet. But if you see this one main building, that vertical line right down the middle, we've got a right side and a left side, which that's really going to help. Let's look at another example. All right, this one is a little more complicated because we've got all these people here trying to distract you. But again, concentrate on one shape at a time. We've got this piece right here. That's one building. And I see this vertical line cutting right down the middle. Right down the middle. So that's going to tell me that I have a right side and my vertical line and a left side. And from there, we can follow those lines down. Now, some of these things, some of these drawings, your vanishing point might be way, way off the page. As a matter of fact, this one's actually kind of way over here. Now, that doesn't matter when you're drawing this because you can always go off the page or you can just crop it and cut it off there. So when you're working on your buildings in your cities, don't be afraid to push off the side. You can add an extra piece of paper and keep continuing that way. All right, so our assignment we're going to be working on is 2 different drawings. We're going to do lots of practice too, so don't worry. Our final assignment is going to be 1 perspective drawing and 1 2-point perspective. So 1-point perspective and a 2-point perspective drawing. And we will be making these into cityscapes. But first, we're going to practice on doing some of the videos. I'll shoot the videos so that way you can see what it's like just to draw with basic boxes. And we'll build from there. All right. Hey, let's get creative.